We asked school board member Ron Jackson if he agreed with his colleague Bob Archibald when he said last week that school board members should be appointed rather than elected by the general public.
180%. I've been involved with the St. Louis Public Schools at some level probably for the last 25 years. Not as a board member, but as an active observer. Bob Wentz was my neighbor. He lived up the street from me back in the late 70s and early 80s. I got to know Jerome Jones when he was the superintendent here. We used to have meetings with the superintendent up at Matthews Dickey community meetings once a month. So I've known probably every superintendent in the district for the past 25 years and have kind of kept tabs on it. My wife was a board member and was president of the board from 1997 to 1999 during the end of DSEG. And my analysis as I look back over the actions of the elected board, in my opinion, the elected board has never been effective in improving academic outcomes for the predominantly African American children in the district. And it hasn't been a priority. It hadn't really been a priority. When DSEG came in 82, I think, when the voluntary transfer program, DSEG had started about 10 years before that. But, in the whole conversation about DSEG, improving academic outcomes was never a criteria. Brown versus the board didn't talk about black kids actually achieving better. It just talked about if you have integrated education that black kids will be in the same environment, so you can't say it's discriminatory if they're in the same classrooms. But it never really talked about academic achievement. So if you look at the actions of the board during DSEG, that about 15 years, between 17 years, between 82 and 99, you see that it was all about desegregation, that the board was about desegregation. And you recall that to show how important it was, in 85 or 86, Tom Bugle and the Southside Rights Group got on the board. There was a 12-member board, and 4 members of the board were from the Southside Rights Group, people who actively opposed desegregation. So that stonewalled a lot of actions that the superintendent at the time, Jerome Jones, tried to make. Just having those 4 people on the board and up to 5 really stonewalled things. And then in 91, 4 for Kids ran, which included Purdy, Robin Wabi, I forget who they were, but 4 for Kids ran and won. And they were supported by a coalition of community people, the business community, the Black Leadership Roundtable, to get the Southside Rights people off the board because it was an embarrassment to St. Louis. So they ran and won. And then by the time 99 comes around, DSEG is ending, right? So the big conversation is what's going to happen when DSEG is. Then they moved the board from a 12-member board to a 7-member board beginning in 2000. Academic achievement still isn't on the agenda in 2000. That's the year that Rochelle Moore and Amy Hilgerman got elected in 2000 and 2001. Academic achievement wasn't on the agenda. What was on the agenda was destination accreditation, because as part of the DSEG settlement agreement, the state actually gave the school district a concession, because the school district should have been unaccredited in 99, technically. But because it was ending DSEG, the state gave the district 8 or 9 more years until 2008 for, quote, a final look at whether or not the district was going to be, quote, accredited, okay? But every, I think, 3 or 4 years, they would come in and take a look at it and see how we were doing, So, the fact of the matter is that academic achievement of kids has never been an agenda item for this school board. When we got on the board, when, the 4 of us got on the board, our whole plan was to, first of all, based on conversations with a lot of people, it seemed that the primary initial step need to be restructuring the operations of the district, okay? So that was our plan, to restructure the operations of the district first, and then to really develop a plan to address improving the academic outcomes for the children in the district. And we did not know, and you were running at that time, about that $75 million budget deficit. I mean, if we had known that when we were running, it would have been a whole different campaign. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with that. So, in other words, focusing on improving the academic outcomes for children hasn't been a priority in this district. So back to the question. And we've seen over the 25 years that I just talked about that anybody can get elected to the school board, irrespective of their agenda. They can have an agenda that has nothing to do with education whatsoever, and they can become school board members. And I believe that in urban districts at a time of change, this is a time of transition in education. When No Child Left Behind came along, changed the whole game of education in America. So you've got to change. You don't have a choice now in order to change. So I believe that in urban school districts, not only in St. Louis, but across the country, the only chance that we have to improve them is basically through appointed boards, because you need stability, and you don't need a different political agenda every year or two getting on the board, kind of changing the course of the ship, because that's just going to cause a whole lot of people to fall off, and most of them are going to be children. So I think the state of Missouri would be acting in the best interest of our children over time if they move from an elected board to an appointed board for some specified period of time. And I'm not sure, I think we would have to do some work about how that appointment process would take place, who would do it, what the terms will be. But I'm convinced, looking at school districts across the country, that that's the last best hope African American children and Hispanic children in urban areas have to get a quality education and to be competitive in a global, technologically advanced world. They're not competing against kids in Missouri. They're competing against kids in Taiwan, Saipan, Australia, all over the world. So we have to raise the bar, and change is always hard. Nobody wants to change if they can avoid it, but I don't think we have a choice.